Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of 4Fusion Friday. We've got in the house today the regular crew. We got George, Lamie, and Eric Porter. And coming back to join us today, we've got our special guest, Mike Jacobs from All That Jazz. Welcome back, Mike. How are you?
Good. How you guys doing?
Doing all right.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Great short notice.
Yeah, filling in at the 11th hour, right?
Yep.
Very good. It helps that you know the albums we're talking about too, right? That's a good.
Most of them. I had to do a quick bone up on a couple of them, but I think we're good.
There you go. Cool. So for those of you who have been following us on these episodes, the first Friday of every month, we've been doing for the last couple of months, the meat and potatoes of each episode is to take a look at 4Fusion albums that are sort of related in some weird way, right? Could be anything, could be year of release, could be a trio, could be their debut album, could be whatever the reason, right? Maybe they each have the same drummer, guitar player, whatever. We usually try to, and George is the mastermind behind this, so usually he'll pick four that are somewhat linked, sort of, whatever the reason might be. And we are going to rank them in our order of preference. But before we get to that, George has his new releases that are coming out in the fusion genre, things you should look out for. We've also got a pick of the week, or pick of the month, I should say, an album that all of us have been listening to that we're going to kind of give our feedback on, and then anything else notable that we should be looking into. So with that, I'll turn it over to George for his new stuff that's coming out that we should be aware of.
All right. I got four this month. First one is collaboration. Bismillah Neander, Digital Shaman. This is a collaboration between the German guitarist Ali Neander and a keyboardist named Preston Vismail. He's from Jamaica. It's an eclectic 2-disc set with fusion styles that run the gamut. For me, the first disc is strong, but it kind of fades over to second disc, but that could be just me. I tend to double disc kind of where I'm usually, but it sounds interesting. People should check that out. Number two is Kick the Cat, live at Martyrs. This is a digital only release from the Gurgle CD release show. It's predictably smoking. I would say if I had a minor beefs with it, it's that it's only the Gurgle album minus one song.
Oh, wow.
Not any past stuff. And there's no they cut, but they edit between all the songs, like an exit stage left style. There's no talking or whatever, but minor beefs, I guess, because the performance is smoking. Then you got this one, Saturday Night in San Francisco, Demiola, McLaughlin, DeLucia. This is the long squirreled away follow-up to the 1981 album Friday Night in San Francisco. This is all new material. There's no repeats. So if you thought, well, I don't really need it, you actually do. This is it. It's pretty much on that level, as you would imagine. It's just the next night, so it's not like they lost it. This is hot stuff. What do you guys think?
I'm really enjoying it. I've only listened to it like 3 times, but it's quite good. I love the fact that there's no repeat songs. And the fact that they've been holding on to this in the vaults for all these years is pretty crazy. I mean, there's some surprises on here. I think Meeting of the Spirits is like, wow, who would have thought that? You got Splendido Sundance on here. It's really good. Trilogy Suite. It's, is it the mind-blowing experience that the Friday night show is and was? I'm not quite sure, but it's the same 3 guys, right? Just playing different materials. So you got to have it if you're a fan. I mean, you really do.
You know why it was held up for so long? Why they never did anything with this?
Well, he was unaware of it for a long time.
Oh.
And then even when he did come across it, he had a hard time talking the other guys into it. I guess especially McLaughlin was kind of like, eh. But then as soon as he got him to actually listen to it, he was all for it, So.
And like Pete said, the fact that there's no repeats, I mean, you got to get it if you like, if you like the first one.
And the last one, the most exciting to me actually is this one, a guy named Lydian Nataswaram.
Yes.
I was practicing it. Lydia Nataswaram. He's a 16-year-old piano prodigy. It's his debut recording of Western Fusion. Apparently he won on a reality show called The World's Best. Never seen it. But I looked into it a little bit, and the guests are like RuPaul and Drew Barrymore, not the guests, the judges. So, I don't know how impressive it is that he won, but he won. This is impressive. He's got some high-profile guests here: Dave Weckl, Mohini Day, Frank Gambale, Eric Marienthal. He's a real mature songwriter, especially for 16 years old, and chops out the door. So it's digital only, but I suggest everyone look into it. He's already cut 5 videos from the album, and it's been out like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good.
Really, really good. Because you've been posting. I've been playing the YouTube clips as you posted them, and we watched the Gambale one today. Now he's fantastic on that cut. But like you said, I think the impressive thing is he's 16 years old. The songs are incredible. Great songwriting.
These kids can play nowadays, man. I mean, that's just the facts, right?
Yeah, it's mightily impressed. It's got top 5 written all over it, but we'll see. Yeah, that's it for new releases.
And George will list these in the down in the comments. So for those of you who want to go check them out. So cool. All right. So I guess that brings us to our 4 albums for today. The battle commences. What do we got, George?
Okay, the topic this month, and I swear I didn't go off of what Pete did last month. I actually suggested it before he did trios last month. But it's trios. So putting it alphabetically, we got Gambale-Hamm-Smith, The Light Beyond, Hellborg-Lane-Sipe, Persone, John McLaughlin Trio live at Royal Festival Hall, self-titled From Ohm. So you are the guest, Mike. You want to kick it off?
Sure. My number 4 is The Light Beyond by Gambale-Hamm-Smith. You know, I knew Frank from the Electric Band mostly, and I did pick up one of his solo discs in the, I guess, 80s, Present for the Future. Everybody know that? Yeah, and that, I don't know whether that was kind of an outlier, but I wasn't into that record, and I was much more into his playing with the Electric Band. So I think, you know, I kind of, you know, times being what they were, I was of limited funds back then, so I kind of held off buying a lot of his solo stuff. But then, of course, I had Stu Hamm's first 3, and Steve Smith's Vital Information, a lot of their stuff, and a lot of the stuff that, you know, since he's pretty much became the house drummer for Tone Center, he was on a lot of stuff. So, I mean, I'm very familiar with all 3 players. But this is the first one of these that I've heard. I was well aware of them, but I think I had heard them back in the day, but I didn't buy it. And this is the first deep dive I've had into it. And it's a good album. Like all these albums, like all your picks are solid. They're solid albums. There's not a stinker in the bunch. But for me, this one kind of holds the bottom down because I think it's just solid. The playing's good. The chemistry is decent. The compositions, you know me, I'm kind of like more of the composition guy. They're adequate, but not as memorable as I would like them to be, and certainly not as memorable as some of the other ones in this grouping for me. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to say this is my number 4, The Light Beyond.
Mm-hmm. Eric?
I'm with Mike on that. That's my number 4. Love Frank, love his playing, and my favorites are the opener, Katadin. Did anyone hear a little Crimson in Lumpy's Lament? A little bit. Just, I guess I think it kind of starts really strong. I think First Look is really good. Ham really sticks out in First Look, I thought, but then you kind of get into the solo stuff, and I would have rather had more group material. I think There's like nostalgia's a little bass thing, the drums, and I'll sound like a hypocrite because I love the guitar solo stuff, but the other stuff, I don't know. It's kind of the same with live records. You hear the drum solos, and I don't know. I'm kind of like, it might be fun to hear once or twice, or if you're at the show, obviously it's cool, but having it on a studio record for me just kind of, they're skippers. So there was a couple in there that, so when you hit kind of, I think it's side 2 or the 5th song. So, but like you said, I mean, the playing's great. There's some really good stuff on there. It just kind of is, kind of falls short in a few spots. It's not a full solid record to me.
All right, Pete?
I'm going to go with Live at the Royal Festival Hall. I will say I like all 4 of these quite a bit. So just because this one's coming at number 4 doesn't mean I don't dig it. Really good. I think the main thing for me is that I'm much more into electric stuff, and this is mostly acoustic stuff. So that's probably the differentiator for me. But there's great performances here. I mean, Treelock Gertu, I think he's the MVP on this. His playing is off the charts, great throughout. There's some great stuff on here. Florianopolis is tremendous. Blue and Green, Mother Tongues. It just comes down to the fact that when it comes to McLaughlin, especially, I like McLaughlin playing electric stuff. I like a lot of his acoustic stuff just fine, but stacked up against these other 3, this one just inches down into the bottom spot for me, but I like it quite a bit. The bass playing of Kai Eckhart is tremendous on here as well. I mean, there's really nothing to complain about with this. It's just, I think that the others for me, I just like them a little bit more, and I just like electric stuff a little bit more. So number 4.
I concur. I love this album. For me, it takes a little while to get going though. They open with a Miles cover, and then they do a 2-part, 2-section song of the 80s Mahavishnu stuff, which I like more than most people. But that particular one, just Josie, it doesn't seem to really kick in here. When they get to Florianopolis, that's where it really shines. Florianopolis, Treelock's tune, Pasha's Love, and Mother Tongues, those 3. The whole album was at that level, you'd have really have something. But and then they close with Blues for Lech Walesa, which is the old Translators tune. To me, the most noteworthy thing is the production on this. It's really, really good. I mean,
it is. Yeah.
Especially for a 1990 record. I mean, it sounds great. And in addition to how good he plays, the Treelock sound, nobody sounds like him. His setup is just incredible. And McLaughlin, typically everybody sounds great. Like you guys said, I mean, it's not that this one's not awesome, but just these other 3 I like a little bit more. So I'll go McLaughlin at 4.
I will say, for folks who really like listening to McLaughlin's acoustic-based albums, this is one of the best, I think.
Yeah, it's really
so, yeah. He burns on it as always. I mean, no denying it.
All right, Mike.
All right, the next 3 got really hard, and they kind of changed places for a while. I have a long history with anything by Sean Lane, and I may not be up to your level, George, with buying all the bootlegs and stuff like that, but man, I've always flown the flag for Sean. And I had, when I first got Persona, well, this is my number 3 Persona. When I first got this record, my quibble was with the sound. There's 3 HLS albums, of note. There's Temporal Analogs, there's Time is the Enemy, and there's this one. I think of all those 3, I like Temporal Analogs the best, then Time is the Enemy, then this one. But I think, the sound of those 3 records are very different, I think. I think they're kind of like a graduation. This one is kind of jarring. Sean Lane's guitar sound is very, especially when he uses that ultra compressed tone. It's really all clean, but it's just super compressed. It's a sound that he didn't use much elsewhere, but it was kind of like, it gnawed at me when I first heard it. But I got used to it on the re-listen, and on the re-listen, I actually like this album a lot better than I did initially. They're blazing, they're just kicking butt, and the only thing is, if you look at the 3 live records, Temporal Analogs, Time is the Enemy, and this one, I think, you know, another problem I have with this one is if you're going to hand it to somebody who's never heard the original versions before, these versions are kind of so exploded that they don't really represent the songs in a, you know, like you get a kind of misrepresentation of what the songs were about. Sometimes they're so blown apart, which is a good thing, but I think it's more of like, you know, you kind of need to have that primer of the original versions from the previous albums to really understand where they're going with this, you know. But that's a small quibble. I mean, they're just smoking. I really appreciated this one a lot more when I revisited it this time. And like I said, these 3, the next 3, deciding who was above the other was really difficult. And so this one just barely comes in at number 3 below the remaining 2. But like I said, man, I'm a huge Sean Lane fan, and you know, if people have not heard him yet, I mean, I don't know what to say to him. I mean, he's not. If I put it in perspective, he's not to me on the level of Alan Holdsworth, because Holdsworth kind of defined like a whole vocabulary as well as being like technically gifted. Lane kind of like took the existing vocabulary, but I mean, he's got technical gifts that just took him to places nobody else has. And so I would recommend all of Sean Lane's albums, you know, with especially the ones with Hellborg-Lane-Sipe. And this is a great one, but it just happens to fall. I had to put it somewhere, so falls at number 3 for me today.
All right. Eric?
That's kind of the fun thing with this, Mike. We're all talking about albums that are killer, but you got to find a place for them, you know? So,
Right.
and I like what Pete said. I'm putting John McLaughlin Trio at number 3, and probably because I've been a lot more focused on the electric stuff, and even though I used The Light Beyond at number 4. And you also pointed out the drumming, which, you know, I was listening to it, and I usually always listen to it from a guitar player. I want to hear the guitar player, but I think, George, you mentioned that Pasha's Love, and it, like, even it's just his cymbal work, like he doesn't even have to be playing the kit, but there's always something going on that's really cool with the drumming. The only thing I think with this one was I heard you guys mention like Mother Tongue and is it Florianopolis? Florianopolis was a little long for me, and I thought that Mother Tongue gets a little spacey, and it loses my attention a little bit in that middle. And then I think the blues for LW, again, this is probably minor, but when they start doing their scatting or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, that wears, after about 2 minutes of that, I'm like, all right, that's enough.
Right, let's move on a little bit. But you know, McLaughlin just killed me. But I think this is the one where I shouldn't say that because they all do, but I really was listening to the other players, and maybe because it was an acoustic based album, I was really listening to the bass. The drums really stood out to me, which honestly, I don't tend to listen to that, or at least I don't think I'm paying attention to that. I'm usually listening to the guitar, but like you said, Treelock is just incredible, whether he's doing some little percussive stuff or just playing the kit. And I thought it was really, his kit is really crisp. And maybe like you said, that has to do with the production, but you know, there's always been certain things like, you know, snare sound or this, but you can't say anything bad about it. Like I said, there's just a couple cuts that ran a little long for me, and a couple sections where, you know, let's move it on or let's move along. But other than that, it's great. And to hear McLaughlin play acoustic, he's just incredible. So that's my number 3, John McLaughlin Trio.
All right, Pete?
All right, I'm going to go with GHS The Light Beyond for my number 3. Kind of a long album, maybe a little longer than it needs to be. But I think I kind of listened to what Eric was saying. I think there's some really good compositions on here. then I think there's some tracks that just kind of don't really go anywhere. I don't think this is their strongest album of this configuration. I think because these guys have done a couple albums together. I might like the other ones a little better than this, but there's some spectacular stuff on here. I mean, Gambale is all over Catahedon. Yang, to me, could have been like a long lost Alan Holdsworth track from like the 80s or the 90s. Really, really good. Throne of Savitar, another great workout for Gambale. Ham is, you know, he shows off his melodic side on a lot of these tracks, but like Nostalgia, the little solo piece, that's really nice. And then he's all over Yin, which is great. Lumpy's Lament, totally terrific, nice and aggressive. And you know, overall, I think it's a really strong album. I think the playing overall from all three guys is really great. I think they would get better as a group on other releases, but it's still fantastic. I mean, I love all three of these guys, and there's plenty of jaw-dropping stuff on here. So great trio. Always dug these guys.
How many did they release?
3.
Great, man.
3. Okay.
Yeah, it's my number 3 as well. I'll echo what Eric said. I can do without these solo pieces. I mean, I'm generally always like that, and this is no exception. I'd rather have, say, 2 other songs than this 3 solo pieces. But that's kind of a trademark of a lot of the Tone Center records.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that the way they operated is they gave you 10 days to write and record the whole album.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, so you know, if they
Low
can
budget?
if they can squeeze a few minutes out of some unaccompanied solos, that's what they were going to do.
Yeah.
But for me, this is a half and half album. The first 4 songs, Katahdin, Yang, First Look, Throne of Savitar, if they kept that going, this is like way up there for me, but they do not. It kind of levels off with the solo pieces, and a couple of the other songs are good, but not like those first 4. So that's why I've had it at number 3. Mike?
Okay, so the next 2, you know, would probably be number 1 for me for 2 different reasons. And it's the classic, you know, listening to it now versus listening to it in context of when it came out thing, you know. So this is my in the moment number 1 that I'm, for whatever reason, I'm just putting at number 2. So Ohm is, I can't, you know, this is the first time I've heard this record. Okay, I've known about it. I just never had it. And I am just like in love with it. I think that these guys, you know, they have that chemistry, like, you know, power trio, fusion trio, you get guitar, bass, and drums. Usually it's the guitar player that's really, you know, telling the tale and really the heart of the group. But man, the bass player on this record and the combination of him with Chris Poland's guitar, that's just like a delicious meal to me. I can't get enough of this record. It's really, and you're going to go, why isn't it number 1? Well, I'll let you know later. But I'm really shocked. I mean, he's got that melodic thing that the best trios have, or best music in general have, like, you know, Steve Morse Band, Attention Deficit, Morgable, those guys, you know, where it's not all about the shredding, where he can certainly shred, but he really takes time to be melodic and memorable and throw twists in. And this record has everything for me. And I'm going to listen to it as soon as we're done, because I've been listening to it a lot. This is the one that's got the most playtime out of all of them since you assigned them. So yeah, definitely. And I'm going to be picking up their other, how many, they have three other ones?
Yeah, and there's a 4th one that's all improv disc, and then there's a live one.
Yeah. Well, and I know they've had different drummers throughout their existence.
Yeah, the debut is the only one with this guy. He had a drug problem and he passed on, but he is an octopus. He's all over the place on this.
Is this Eagle? Is that his name, David Eagle?
David Eagle, yeah.
Yeah. Well, even he, I mean, maybe not to as large an extent as the other 2, but even he has a slightly different approach to percussion than say your normal, whatever normal drummer is. But he's not a groove drummer. He's definitely, he has a percussion approach rather than a drum kit approach. You know, I think that's what I hear. So it's like all these three things really make something really yummy. That's all I can say, man. I'm very pumped to have heard this, and thank you, George. So that's my number two. Oh,
All right. Eric, what do you got?
My number two is Persone. And I think, Mike, what you were saying, you're a longtime fan. I'm fairly new to Sean Lane. I'd always heard about him. We did Powers of 10 on one of the previous shows, and he's unbelievable. I mean, the speed, the precision he plays with, but I know when I remember hearing people talk about him, it was always how fast he was. But when you listen on here, everything isn't 100 miles an hour. I mean, he does play melodically. I think what you were talking about, is it that rag R&B or I think it's the second track where it's really heavily compressed, and I think he's using a lot of whammy. It's not a sound that I care for that much. I mean, that's really heavily compressed. And I think maybe the only separation between this and my number one, it's a little more, and I might be wrong, I get the impression it's more improv-y. It's almost the Hellborg-Lane-Sipe, just kind of, they've got something there, because obviously Hellborg and Lane do play some unison lines, so there are things that are worked out, but then it sounds like things kind of go off. And maybe that's where I'm more like the composed stuff versus the improv. But I mean, with this being live, and it's just killer. I mean, all three of them, again, I think we're talking about trios. All three are great on this. And is Jeff Sipes the guy that, is it the apartment Q251 or whatever with Colonel Bruce Hampton? So that just seemed, when I started reading about him, I'm like, he's played with a lot of people too. Obviously a great drummer, kind of across the board. So, but Sean Lane, I'm getting into. I obviously got to get some more of his stuff. But anyone who likes guitar, got to get this. So that's my number two.
All right, Pete.
I'm going to go with OHM or OHM or whatever the hell you want to call it, however you want to say this. Yeah, I mean, I had this since it came out, and I remember at the time, this was kind of like somewhat of a strange release for Lion Music, right? Because they really weren't doing stuff like this. But and I've been listening to Poland since, day one with Megadeth, so I always knew him as a amazing thrash player. And then he comes out with this. I remember being like completely blown away. It's like, wow, I didn't know this guy had it in him. But as we have found out in the ensuing years, yeah, this is his first love, right? This is what he really likes to do. He's a terrific fusion player. He works so well with Roberto Pagliari. I mean, the two of them are just a match made in heaven. And Eagle's a great drummer. The three of these guys just seem like they're, they got the telepathy going throughout this whole album. It's actually a pretty heavy record too in spots, which I like. I like the aggressive stuff. But man, Peanut Buddha, whatever you want to say it, totally cranks. Yeah. Love that. Where's My Hat? Another brilliant track. I love Poland's tone throughout this entire album. Really, really good. And Pagliari's bass lines are just so melodic, so sublime. I mean, just a really underrated player here. Came to Believe has got some amazing shredding from Poland on it. It's just, this album's got one winner after another. And I honestly, I hadn't listened to this in a lot of years when I played it recently to get ready to do the show today. And I was like, wow, where has this been hiding? Well, it's been hiding in my closet, but where's this been hiding all these years? So yeah, I'm guilty of not listening to OHM much in recent years, just because there's always so much other stuff to listen to, but it just reminded me how much I really like this album. So it's only number two because, man, the number one just yanks my crane just a little bit more, or yanks my chain, I should say, not crane. So yeah, so that's number two.
With you again. Like you, I was surprised the Megadeth guy puts out, I mean, I had heard about it before it came out, so I was skeptical, and I heard it, I was just totally blown away. I'm not a player like you guys, but to me, his vibrato, I know it's him in 2 seconds. It's just something about the way he bends notes. I just instantly know it's him. And same for Pagliari. He's kind of like Percy Jones. That's who he reminds me of the most, but more wild. He's just like, and you see him live too. He's the same way. He's stomping on pedals and all these bends and stuff. I mean, he's a wild man. David Eagle is one of those fill up every spot with something guys. He's playing time, good time, but then little stuff in between. The songs, they're of the shorter variety. You got like 14 songs on here. There's not a lot of extended developing fusion epics. You know, they're more like playing the head. A lot of beautiful stuff though. I mean, the songwriting is definitely a facet of this record. And then, yeah, everybody rips too. So that's always nice. The two follow-ups I like as well, but this is still my favorite. Ohm, self-titled. Mike?
Yeah. So, like I said, Ohm was my album of the moment. Like, it's the Candy album. This one, I have to, you know, I wouldn't have placed this here if you asked me before I revisited it. But, you know, everything you said about live at Royal Festival Hall with John McLaughlin works for me in a way that you guys have it down further. And the reason, you know, it's context. It's okay. First of all, McLaughlin for me falls in that category of guys that really I don't like their tone most of the time. Like Steve Howe's another guy. Like, man, I can't stand the sound of Steve Howe's guitar, but his playing transcends that for me. So I can deal with it. And McLaughlin, you know, he's played different sounds and different instruments all through his career, but this particular sound I love. I don't know how you guys feel about the synth component, but to me, the pairing of the acoustic guitar with the synth it's just magic for me. I don't know if that sounds dated to anybody else's ears, but it doesn't to mine. So that's big plus. The other thing is, for me, this group is probably, you know, it's hard to rank McLaughlin's groups, but I love this group as much as I love Mahavishnu and Shakti. I mean, and the Fourth Dimension. I mean, I think this was a real landmark for him, and it's a real shame they only put out 2 albums. Now, this being said, I probably like the second album a little bit more than this one. K Allegria, I guess that's how you say it.
Yeah.
But you know, when I went back and listened to this record, first of all, it's a different power trio. This is like nothing like any of the ones that you selected for this month, or most of the other you know, electric fusion power trios you've ever heard before. Of course, it's got acoustic guitar, but it's also got the synth. But what it also has for me is, you know, okay, I mentioned like the chemistry of Ohm, you know, having all those flavors together, really make it something special. Well, it has that plus, I think these players, the Trelock, you know, it was the first time he really stepped on the stage for most people. You know, this album was his big, you know, coming out party. And man, I mean, he can hold the floor. You know what I mean? Like that was it Mother Tongues. It's just, I mean, I know it might be long for some people, but to me, like if I can sit there and listen to a percussionist, you know, putting a gong underwater and making bird calls and stuff like that, and it's just transporting to me, that whole thing. And I never heard a drummer that did that, let alone have a kit that sounds like his does. It's totally different from anybody's kit. What's he got? He's got a mounted bass drum that he hits with a stick, right, George?
Yep.
I mean, I have personal friends that were drummers that were trying to get that sound forever. You know? Like the one guy had a mounted tom. You know, it's, and then you have Kai Eckhart, they can all hold the floor, and you know, the other guy's support. And so that group has so much range. It's just incredible. And I think that, coupled with the fact that it's really a landmark trio for McLaughlin in a career full of landmark groups, that's why I have to put this at number one, just because I appreciated it so much more when I revisited it this time. Might be different tomorrow, but I was really blown away, and I didn't expect it to be number one. I really didn't, but today it is.
It's a real shame that beyond K Allegria, that they didn't explore it more, because I think I would have been very interested to see where they took it. It's one of my favorite lineups from him too.
Absolutely.
You know, McLaughlin, he gets restless and he's got to do something else.
Got that Miles gene.
All right, Eric, what do you got?
Oh, and this is the record I was most familiar with. As a matter of fact, of the four, this is the only one I owned prior to you giving us our assignment, so to speak. And I'm not a metal guy. I had no idea Chris Poland played with Megadeth when I bought it. Somebody had told me, here's a great band, great guitar player. I went and bought it. But I think what Mike was saying about compositions, to me, these are the most, and it may be my familiarity with it too, but these songs all stick out to me in terms of there's just memorable melodies. I love that Poland can shred. He's very melodic. And there's a couple tunes that are a little more laid back, and I like them. I don't know that there's a track on here that I don't like across the board. I love his tone. And I think, like you said, there's a lot of room for Pagliari to play here. I mean, it's not all Poland. I mean, there's a lot of bass that's up front. And you mentioned Percy Jones. I'll take his tone any day over Percy Jones. And I'm not trying to be blasphemous. I really like his bass playing. I don't know that I can say anything else because you guys have already talked about it. But Poland, to me, he's, after going back and listening to this, he's got to be one of my favorite players, period. I just love his, and I don't know much about his time with Megadeth or what is he doing now?
Guest stars here and there. You see him pop up playing solos and stuff. And
Ohm is still together. They just are not putting out records. I mean, they do the occasional gig at the big, but
Big Potato, right?
been on a couple Redemption albums, you know.
yeah, I love him in Redemption.
Yeah.
I just posted something on the Jazz Rock Fusion group yesterday that was relatively new. They released a song.
I saw that, Mike. You put something out there.
Yeah.
So is that says Ohm or under the Ohm?
Yeah, it's open, but I don't know where they're going with it. Like anymore, you know, there's, I expect the older guys will be, you know, putting out albums because that's the way they think. But anymore, there's really no allegiance to, you know, putting out a whole album of material because the format's really arbitrary anymore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but we'll see. I'll be looking for whatever they put out now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I hear the new drummer is great, but you know, who's heard him other than people that live in California? All right, Pete, what you got?
Person A. I mean, this is insane stuff. I have become a real big fan of Sean Lane in recent years, and every album I hear with him on it just literally blows me away. I mean, Time is the Enemy on here totally burns. The title track has some of his fastest, most explosive soloing ever. Heretics is amazing. You get these, and what I like about the stuff on this album, and really all of their albums, because you guys have mentioned their ability to improvise, I think is really cool. So while I agree to an extent with Mike about how, you know, some of these tracks, they're more explosive here in a live situation, you get more improv and jamming, and maybe you don't get quite the feel of the studio versions. I don't really mind it with these guys because they're such good improvisers, and they wow me with everything they do. I mean, Heretic is like, you get this great Hellborg solo, you get this great Sipe solo, and then Lane comes in and he just devastates everything. And it's like, but yet the song holds my attention. And Rice with the Angel, another completely explosive song. I mean, just this whole album for me just is absolutely mind blowing. And, it's got the chops, it's got melody, it's got great improvs. And these guys are just so locked in together. I love hearing these guys playing together. I wish we got a lot more from them. But, and I wish we still had Sean Lane, basically. But yeah, Hellborg-Lane-Sipe is my number one.
That was a live concert. That's the concert I would send everybody to see.
Yeah.
But as an album, I had like, I don't know, it's weird. I consider the others canon, and this is like a special case, So
I get it. Yep.
Yeah.
My number one as well. And I'll take off from what Mike said. His minuses for this are all strengths for me. I think this is a lot better than Time is the Enemy and Temporal Analogs. I actually sold those because never could get into those at all. The production on those is definitely inferior to this to me. The guitar sounds inferior. And it's no songs on those. Those are entirely improvised, especially Time is the Enemy. This has got the songs from Abstract Logic and the Michael Shreve album, and they've done it better on the drummer. They weren't happy with Kofi Baker or Michael Shreve. Jeff Sipe's a huge improvement. So all these versions sound better. I don't even play those albums anymore. I still have them, but I never play them because these are the definitive versions of those songs for me.
Hurting me.
This is just the guitar playing is just over the top, so good. Time is the Enemy, Rice with the Angels. That's the one I play for people that's the jaw dropper one that you just want to impress somebody. Put that one on.
That's the closer, right, George?
Closer, yeah. It's just, there's no pretense about trying to be nifty or anything. He's just blowing the doors off right from the start.
Shred, and more shred, right? Yeah.
The niftiest one's probably on the title track. That's pretty deep. I really get into that one. Basically, other than the fact that Rag BB kind of drags on, I would say this is flawless for me. This is a top 3 live album of all time on my list. So it was no doubt for me this was going to be number one. Although Ohm gives it a run, but this is my number one.
For those that don't know about Sean Lane, the mind-blowing fact for me, especially about this album, where he's just blown it apart speed-wise, is that he had psoriatic arthritis, and he would actually he couldn't get health care, blah, blah, blah. He was in pain all the time, especially at the end of his life. And so he would save up whatever medication he could just to play these gigs. But the fact that this guy's in pain and playing like that is just oh my God. Imagine if he was, got the health care he needed and he wasn't in pain. It just blows my mind. It's such a tragedy that we lost him. It's such a tragedy that he went through all that and was so great despite it. I wish things could have been different for him.
You mentioned Me with the Boots. This came out in 2002, but it was recorded in 96.
Oh, what? Okay.
Yeah, and it was selected shows. If you listen to all the Boots from that entire year, every night is just the same. There was no down nights. Every night is like an incredible night. It's kind of amazing. Yeah. But I like that in that era they were sticking to those songs from those 2 albums. By the next year, they were already doing all these improvs, which is interesting too. But we're composition guys, so we like to hear at least some framework, and that's another reason why I don't like the following ones.
What's funny is, as much of a Sean Lane fan as I am, I prefer the live. Well, let's put it this way: his studio albums are. After I've heard the rest of his output, the studio albums sound too produced for me, almost. I've heard him bust out of that, and now I don't. I rarely visit Powers of 10. They're great. They have their great moments, but it's like he doesn't belong in that kind of studio. You know what I mean?
It's like the other side of a coin. This is the wild side,
right?
And then his solo stuff is the cultured, melodic, produced approach.
Right. Yeah. It's
Like that
interesting.
Powers of 10 live. I mean, I listen to that more than I listen to Powers of 10.
Right. And that's
They're
it's
both
almost
great.
the
They're
same-
both great.
It's almost the same material too. Almost all of it. You know?
Yeah.
It's a great album. It's a great album.
All right. We got the pick of the week, right, George?
Yeah. Last month, I assigned the guys another trio. Fragile 5 came out in 2000. The fifth release, obviously, from this Japanese band. What'd you think, Eric?
Well, why can't we find their CDs is number one. I had No Wet, and somebody burned that for me. So I don't own anything official. George, you got me this one.
They do exist.
They do exist. Yes, they do. I love these guys. I think there's a rock element to them. They're very heavy. At the same time, I love Yabori, the guitar player, which again, I know that's technically what I always say I listen for. And we always talk about the openers, right? So Vacuum Bottle kills. I mean, you hear that and you're just like, all right, you know you're in for a treat. I think the only thing I didn't like on this was that Fuchsia. Is that where he uses like a guitar synth? And I think Cosmos, the closer, is almost more rock than fusion. But we talked about, Pete had texted while we were all listening to this, and he's like, is that Mike Stern on there? And so Pete picked that out, and I had heard, I'm like, okay, I hear that tonality, but I don't know enough about these guys yet. And as soon as I saw Pete send that, I'm like, oh, okay. So I did pick up on it, even though too chicken to come out and say, hey, what am I hearing here? But if this had been in, I don't know where I would have put this, because I love this, and I love No Wet too. I mean, those are the only two that I've heard from this band, but this is heavy, intense, fusion, rock, whatever you want to call it. Just somebody carry these so I can buy them, please.
Pete?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great album and a really great band. Yeah, I was listening to this for the first time, like a week or so ago, and this first like 3 or 4 notes in that solo in Belvedere, I'm like, wait a second. That's got to be Stern. Either that or this guy is doing a perfect impression, because I've been listening to Mike since like the mid 80s. I mean, I bought Upside Downside when it first came out, and I had Man with the Horn from Miles Davis. I was like, that's got to be Stern. And George is like, you got a good ear, man. That of course is him. He's uncredited. I'm like, oh, cool. But the whole album is great. You know what this album reminds me of? It reminds me of the Steve Morse Band, little jazzier on steroids. And I shouldn't just say more jazzier, because this album rocks, but there's a nice little jazz fusion element, jazz rock element to this. But I agree with Eric. It rocks. Like Cosmos is crushing. There's no jazz about that at all. Really great. Vacuum Bottle, terrific. Daisy is terrific. Latte, amazing. Love the guitar solo in that. These guys are tight. The songs are memorable. All 3 players are absolute virtuosos. I want to hear more of these guys. But I remember George turned me on to these guys, I don't know, 8 months ago, George? Something like that. He sent me some files to listen to, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And I remember going out like immediately trying to find some of the CDs. Nope, couldn't find them anywhere. I was like, all right. But
I think the second time I was the second Prog Seat show, I think was the instrumental albums, and I had this album on my list, and you 3 gave me the look, like it's really good.
yeah.
Sometimes that's not enough, you got to push the point. What do you think, Mike?
This is the one I spent the least amount of time with. I hadn't heard. Certainly knew of these guys, but there's so much I haven't heard. Oh my god! So yeah, I'm glad you told me that Stern made a cameo, because I was getting ready to rip into the guy for copping Stern too much. I really enjoyed it though. I mean, I'm really thankful this wasn't in the rankings, because it would have just made my head explode.
Exactly.
I thought, you said Fuchsia. I thought he sounded a lot like Hendo with that, Scott Henderson kind of vibe with the synthesizer.
Yeah.
Trying to put my finger on what it was reminding me of. And, you know, when I thought he was copping Stern, my complaint was like, okay, do these guys' moms recognize him when they hear him on the radio? You know, because they were kind of like, but you know, it's an amazing record, and you know, the last track, Cosmos, is probably my favorite. I'm a sucker for odd meter, but I mean, they just ripped through that. I mean, and I'll definitely be listening to that one again.
And is that the one where all of a sudden it's like, it's done? And I'm like,
Yeah.
did it skip? Did I lose?
My files got clipped.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It is an abrupt edit.
A very abrupt end on that.
It is.
Yeah, for me, Vacuum Bottle, that bass line just gets in your head, man. That's a total earworm that he runs that bass line on. Daisy, classic fast shuffle, you know, a la Space Boogie Quadrant 4. A Belvedere, we said, with the Stern. Dragonfish, that's the short one. The drummer wrote that. That one's off the chain, man. It's incredible. And yeah, Fuchsia and Cosmos is great double blast at the end. I just love this album. If this was in the group, I'd consider it for number one. I'm really into this album.
You know, it's funny when you hear a band like this and, you know, you're someone like myself who's always said for many, many years, always been, oh, my favorite fusion band from Japan is like Kenso, right? Who are, you know, fusion prog. And then you hear something like this and you're like, yeah, Kenso is great, but man, this is like miles above it.
Yeah.
Crazy. Just without the keyboards, obviously.
And there's 12 of them. There's no Lamie in the group. I mean, at least 10 of them are, you know, in the neighborhood.
Wow.
Crazy.
All right. Well, my assignment for the next one, David Hines, Nebula, 2005. That's all we'll say about it for now.
Okay.
You haven't heard,
Underlauded
right?
guitar player.
What's that?
He's an underlauded guitar player.
Yeah.
I've heard some of his later things. I've never heard that before.
Oh, good. That's a tale for next time.
Sounds good. So
I do want to say, we were supposed to have Chris Siebold from Kick the Cat tonight. He's sick, so just want to say, hope you're feeling better, Chris.
yep, get
And
well.
we'll get you on later, as
Oh,
soon as we can.
Yep.
And thanks to Mike for stepping in on very short notice.
thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks again, Mike. Appreciate
My
it.
pleasure again, gentlemen. Thanks for asking me.
Cool. We'll have you on again. So back here on 4Fusion Friday before you know it. So thanks for watching, everybody. Down in the comments below. For those of you who have not heard any of these albums that we talked about today, go ahead and give them a spin somewhere and come back and report and let us know what you think. If you're familiar with all of them, rank them as you like them. And if you feel like taking the assignments just like we are, you got some listening to do. So thanks for watching. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. Go check out Mike over at All About Jazz. And for Eric Porter, Mike Jacobs, and George Lamie, I am Pete Pardo. Tune in next month for another episode of 4Fusion Friday. Till then, have a good weekend, and we'll see you real soon. Take care.